let's be real for a sec. How many of you out there have used that scream emoji? You know the one. But how many of us actually know anything about the guy who painted it? Edvard Munch. Iconic painting. What else is there, right?
It's funny how one image can be so famous.
Right. So that's what we're diving into today. Edvard Munch, Beyond the Scream. We've got articles, exhibition reviews, the whole shebang.
Yeah, we're going deep on this one. Uncovering the man behind the masterpiece. Should be interesting.
Always is. So before we get into all the nitty-gritty details, what's the 2-minute rundown of who Munch was in the art world?
Well, think of it this way. If art history was a family tree, Munch would be on that branch that leads to expressionism.
Mm-hmm.
Big emotions, bold colors. He was one of the first.
So even though he was painting over a century ago, his work still feels relevant today.
Totally. He was way ahead of his time. And speaking of which, there's a huge exhibition coming up in Oslo, all about Munch.
Oh, yeah. I think I saw something about that. That's the one where they revealed there are actually multiple versions of the Scream, right?
Yeah.
Blew my mind. I always thought it was just the one painting.
Nope. At least 4 original Screams, 2 paintings, 2 pastels, and then he went on to make, over 40 lithographs, even hand-colored some of them. Crazy dedicated to this one image.
Hold on, back up for a sec. Multiple Screams. He made more than one Scream.
He did.
I need to process this. So he wasn't content with just one.
Not at all. Munch was obsessed with reinterpreting his ideas, testing out how different mediums could change the feeling of a piece. And so it wasn't about making copies, it was more about exploration. How many ways can he capture this feeling?
Wow, okay. That's actually really cool. Kind of like how musicians will remix their own songs these days.
Exactly. It's like he was remixing his art, always experimenting.
I read that he did this really cool lithograph of the sick child, but he used these thick, bold lines, totally different from the paintings of the same image.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to experiment, to push boundaries. It was all about the effect. How do I make the viewer feel something? Not about creating a perfect original.
So cool. You know what else I read that just blew my mind? He would leave some of his paintings outside, exposed to the elements.
Oh, yeah. His Rosker technique.
Killer cure, right.
That's the one. Wild, right?
Totally. What was he thinking?
Munch was all about embracing the unexpected, letting the forces of nature become part of his art. The passage of time, it's all connected.
So some of the paintings we see in museums today, they might actually look different than when he first painted them.
Exactly.
That's wild. Okay, this is already changing how I see his work, but we've talked a lot about the art itself. What about the man, Edvard Munch, the guy?
Well, to understand his art, you got to understand his life.
Right, spill the tea.
And let me tell you, his life was intense.
Oh, I am here for it. Give me all the drama. What are we talking about here?
Sick. Tragedy, family drama, and a whole lot of existential angst. This is a man who knew darkness.
Okay, you said tragedy, family drama, existential angst. Lay it on me. How dark is it?
Well, how's this for a start? Munch loses his mother and a sister to tuberculosis when he's just a kid.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty dark.
And it doesn't stop there. He loses another sister to illness later on. Just imagine the impact of all that loss.
Yeah, I can see how that would really affect someone. I mean, it's no wonder his art has that melancholy feel to it.
Right, and then on top of all that, his father was super religious, severe,
No, tense.
Yeah, exactly. It created this really heavy atmosphere at home, and you can see all that in his art, mortality, anxiety, you can just feel it.
It's like he poured all his childhood trauma into his paintings.
Yeah, in a way. It's all there, just below the surface.
An article I was reading mentioned only one of his siblings actually made it to old age.
Right. It was a rough start for him, that's for sure.
And he never, talked about how any of this affected his art.
Well, back then, artists didn't really give interviews the way they do now.
True.
But there are clues. Remember that inscription we were talking about? The one on one of the versions of The Scream.
Can only have been painted by a madman. Yeah, that one.
For years, everyone thought it was graffiti.
Yeah.
But now they're pretty sure Munch himself wrote it.
Whoa. Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
He wrote that on his own painting?
Seems that way.
That is wild. What do you think that means?
It's like a glimpse into his psyche.
Right.
Maybe a little dark humor. It's like he's saying, yeah, I'm tapping into something dark here. Are you coming along for the ride?
It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah, a bit. But, that was part of his genius. He wasn't afraid to go to those dark places.
And to share them with the world.
Exactly. He put it all out there.
Speaking of putting it all out there, what about this guy's love life? Because I'm not gonna lie. I read some juicy stuff about this.
It was messy.
Oh, yeah. Messy is putting it mildly. We're talking about a guy who could turn a fight with his girlfriend into a literal gunshot wound. Okay, yeah. The gunshot wound. You can't just drop that and not tell me everything. Who was this woman? What happened?
Her name was Tula Larson. She came from money. And their relationship, oh boy. It was the definition of a fiery, passionate, doomed romance.
Ugh. I am here for all of this. Tell me more.
So Tula was head over heels for Munch. She wanted to marry him. And Munch was not exactly rushing down the aisle.
Yeah, so this was like a one-sided thing.
Kind of. He had complicated feelings about marriage in general and about Tula. I mean, he was attracted to her, sure, but he was also afraid of what she represented. A threat to his art, maybe.
So not exactly a match made in heaven.
Not even close. And it all came to a head during this huge argument they had.
This is it. This is the gunshot wound incident, right? What went down? So they're in the middle of this huge fight, right? What happened? Give me the details.
Well, like I said, it's all a bit murky. We don't know exactly what went down. But in the heat of the moment, Munch ends up shooting himself in the hand.
He shot himself. Oh, man. That's intense.
Yeah, talk about a dramatic breakup. It was the final straw for their relationship.
Wow. You'd think after all that, he'd swear off women altogether, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But nope. Munch kept right on falling in love. Although none of his other relationships were quite as dramatic as the one with Tula Larson.
I guess some people are just magnets for drama. So did he, keep making art about these relationships?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love, loss, heartbreak. Those themes pop up again and again in his work. It's like he couldn't escape them, even if he wanted to.
And did he want to? It kind of sounds like he dedicated his whole life to art.
He did. But it wasn't always easy for him. Remember those mental health struggles we talked about earlier? Well, things came to a head for Munch in 1908. He had a full-on breakdown.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. What happened?
He actually ended up in a sanatorium for a while.
Wow, so he was really struggling. Did he ever recover?
He did, eventually. But it was a turning point in his life, that's for sure. And in his art, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, you start to see a shift after his breakdown. Fewer scenes of, raw, intense emotion. And a lot more landscapes and self-portraits.
So it's like instead of painting the anxieties of the world, he was searching for some kind of peace in nature.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to put it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So even though his most famous works are those really emotionally heavy ones,
Right.
he never stopped growing as an artist.
Exactly. And his later work, it's still very powerful, just in a different way. It's more about solitude, reflection, a connection with something bigger than himself, which, when you think about everything he went through, kind of makes sense.
It really does. And it's interesting because even though he was working in the late 1800s, early 1900s,
Right.
his work still feels so relevant today.
It does.
Remember those Pokemon cards we talked about earlier? The ones based on the screen?
Oh, yeah. That was such a cool collaboration.
I know. You wouldn't think those two things would go together, but it totally works, right?
Totally. It shows that Munch tapped into something universal. Those feelings of fear, anxiety, loneliness, they transcend time.
Mm-hmm.
They transcend culture. They're just part of what it means to be human.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you're looking at a painting from 100 years ago or a Pokemon card from today. That feeling of unease, of existential dread, it still hits you in the gut.
It does. And just like those Pokemon, some of whom are, literally born from loss and sadness, Munch understood the power of those darker emotions. He didn't shy away from them.
It's kind of inspiring, actually. When you think about everything he went through, the loss, the heartbreak, his own struggles with mental health.
It's a lot.
He never stopped creating.
He did.
He took all that pain and he turned it into art that still speaks to people today.
That's the power of art.
It really is. Well, folks, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Edvard Munch. But before we go, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. What is it about Munch's art? Those colors, those swirling lines, those haunting expressions that allows his work to transcend time. Why do we still find it so captivating, so unsettling, so deeply, deeply human, even after all these years? Think about it. And until next time, keep diving deep.